Hey YouTubers, greetings from Eltopia, Washington. Just got looking back through some old videos and I noticed Kyle's dad, 77, had a video up a while back that he was asking how we got our YouTube name. Well, mine comes from the town I live in, and I hope this shows up. This picture was taken about 1903 or 4, I suppose. Town isn't that much different now. Most of those buildings are gone. The street's still there. Doesn't look that much different. Don't know if you can see in here, over in this corner, some chickens on the street. It was quite a little place in its day. Anyway, it's called Eltopia, E-L-T-O-P-I-A. The way it got its name, the Northern Pacific Railroad came through here in 1881. They built the main line up from Pasco, this part of the main line from Pasco to Spokane, about 120 miles basically. And this was one of the water stops. Basically every 17 miles, I think it was, there was a well drilled. I'm not sure why they were spaced that far apart, but the bigger towns seemed to be that far apart, plus about halfway in between each one of those there was another well and a smaller railroad camp that would not necessarily grow up into a town, but would last for a while with a few farmers around. Anyway, 1881, they came through here and they were putting in the grade for the railroad, and there was a cloud burst, and it washed out most of the work they had done that week. And there was a Cockney laborer, it said, on the crew, and he said there'll be L to pay in the morning. And the railroad workers liked it because L to pay, L to pay, well, it kind of fits this area. We're in a desert here in the southeastern corner of Washington State. And it's green now because most of the land is irrigated. But in the early days, it was just sand and sage. That was it. Jackrabbits and rattlesnakes. That was the two biggest crops, probably. But some hardy souls came here in the early days. Anyway, that's how the town got its name, and I grew up here, so I just took the name the Eltopian. And if that's any interest to anybody, I hope so. Just thought I'd give you that little tidbit of information. Got another picture here. Hope this one shows up. This is how they used to bring in wheat into town. I think there's 12 head of horses on here and 3 wagons. And they're all burlap bags of wheat, burlap sacks, gunny sacks, we always called them. And they brought them in and put them, they had 2 warehouses right beside the railroad tracks. And, trains would come through and pick up the sacked wheat and take it on. Anyway, that's just a short history of the town. I just thought I'd let you know about that, in case anybody cares. And thought I'd start a little series about the history around here. I love history. And thought I'd tell you a few stories from my dad's life and about the early town, what it was like. My father was born just outside of Eltopia in 1916. To put it in perspective. And he used to talk about growing up in the 20s and 30s. And we think, well, okay, the 30s, that was the Depression. Well, my dad never used the word depression. He always talked about the hard times, back in the hard times. And for them, the hard times started a long time before the stock market crash of 29. They came out here from Iowa. My dad was born out here, but out of 8 kids, the 3 oldest ones were born in Iowa. And my dad's folks came out here in 1912, I believe. My great uncle, my grandmother's brother, oldest brother, had already come out here in 1906, and their parents would have been my father's grandparents. Had come out here with him in 1906, and they had homesteaded, and they were already established out here. So they wrote back and talked my grandfather, my dad's dad, into coming out here. Grandma, I guess she didn't want to do it because Iowa was at least green. But my grandfather was working for relatives back there, for cousins, and he really didn't care for them. And he just wanted to get out of there. So they came out here, and they damn near starved to death the first several years they were here. Things didn't really get good for them until the late 30s, early 40s. Till just before the war, I guess. But they came out here, and they lived in or rented or moved into whatever old homestead shack they could find for a while until they couldn't rent it anymore, maybe had to move to another place. And my granddad just worked odd jobs. He worked for the county road crew a long time, and of course all the farmers did to get extra money. And nobody out here in the early days had any money to speak of. He did other things. They had a few head of sheep most of the time my dad was a kid. Pastured them out there around where they lived. And that's how they made it. But there was a lot of times Dad said they went hungry, and he didn't know if they'd wake up in the morning or they'd be dead. But anyway, things went along and eventually got better with time. But my grandfather was from Germany. He had come over here when he was about 9 years old, his family. And they had, you wouldn't really call them stowaways, but they had come over on a ship, on a freighter. I guess they'd worked their way across. He was only 9 years old, and they put him to work doing every menial job on the freighter they could, and Lord knows what they made the women do to work their passage off. But anyway, they got over here in the 1860s. And then later on, when he married my grandmother, she had been born in this country. But her parents came from Prussia. But they came through Ellis Island, and eventually they settled down in Iowa. And that's kind of where my more immediate family, well, it's where my immediate family starts, as far as my father's side is concerned. And it was my grandmother's brother that talked my grandfather into coming out here. And like I say, my grandmother wasn't too much for it, but she put up with it. And folks, the land out here, since it's irrigated, now it looks very nice, but the parts that aren't irrigated and aren't farmed or just used for pasture, if you just look at them, you have to think, why would anybody settle out here? It was just the end of the earth. But they did. They came out here, and they made a life for themselves, and they were farmers. My grandfather never bought any land. The two oldest sons would work out, and they'd scrape some money together where they could rent a little piece of land one year, and then built it up and finally bought it, and they made a ranch out of it. And of course, let's see, it was a big family. There were 8 kids in the family, 7 boys, 1 girl. My dad was somewhere in the middle. And I don't know, those early days, he's told me a lot of stories about those early days. I'll start a series on these, and maybe I'll do another video today, and I'll see if I can get them both up. And I'll start a little series of stories that my dad told me. He remembers when he was about, well, just a short one, that he was about 12 years old. And they were living at the time in this small house. It was made, how should I explain this? It was typical of the houses out here. It was made out of clapboard, or shiplap, some people call it. What it is a board that's about a 1/4 inch thick, tongue and groove. And you just built your frame, and then you nailed the boards vertically, upright, up and down. And that was it. That was your house. You slapped a roof on it. And, anyway, they were living in a little house like that. And his father had a large chair that he liked to sit in. And right above him was a kerosene lamp bolted to the wall. Well, it was one of these winter nights when it was already dark when Dad got through with his chores, and he came in the door of the house, and there was a big blast of cold air that came in, and my grandfather, pardon me, was sitting in the chair reading underneath this light. Well, that blast of cold air hit that kerosene lamp and just shattered the globe on it. And Dad said, there was a piece of hot glass that went down the back of his neck. And he let out a wow and did a somersault out of the chair. And my dad, being 12 years old, he thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever seen in his life. But you didn't dare laugh at your elders back then. So he held it in. He said he closed the door. He went out, closed the door, ran up on the hill, and just sat down and laughed. He just thought that was great. But I'll have to tell you a couple of more little stories about what they went through in the early days. I think you'll find them interesting. Anyway, I'm going to cut this little video short here just to see how it looks and see how it came out. And hopefully in the next day or two I'll get a couple more up and see if you like them. Anyway, this is the Utopian, and I'll see you down the road.